The day had started like any other. I woke up early, prepared breakfast, and kissed my husband, Mark, goodbye as he headed off to work. We had been married for 3 years, and while it wasn't always smooth sailing, I thought we were a happy couple. Little did I know that this day would be the catalyst for a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. As the clock ticked towards the afternoon, I returned home from my own job, tired but looking forward to a peaceful evening. The moment I stepped into our cozy suburban home, I sensed a palpable tension in the air. The atmosphere was thick with resentment, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what had transpired in my absence. The living room, usually a place of comfort, was now a battlefield. There sat my mother-in-law Martha, her usually composed demeanor replaced by a storm of anger. She was a formidable woman, known for her strong opinions and domineering presence, but today she seemed particularly incensed. I greeted her politely, trying to ignore the simmering hostility, but Martha wasted no time. She launched into a scathing tirade, accusing me of neglecting my duties as a wife, of being lazy and selfish. Her words were like a barrage of verbal artillery, each one hitting its mark, and my defense seemed feeble against her onslaught. Despite the unjust accusations, I tried to maintain my composure, reminding myself that I needed to handle the situation with grace. I attempted to explain myself, to defend my actions, but my words only seemed to stoke the flames of her fury. That's when it happened. In the midst of her rage, her face contorted with contempt, Martha's hand came crashing across my cheek with a force that caught me completely off guard. The pain was instant and searing, a sharp sting that seemed to echo through the room. I staggered back, clutching my throbbing cheek, tears welling up in my eyes. My mind raced, wondering how I had ended up in this nightmare. I never imagined that I'd be slapped by my own mother in my own home. As the searing pain from Martha's slap still throbbed on my cheek, I stood there, stunned and speechless. The room felt heavy with tension, and the air seemed to crackle with anger. Martha's face, still contorted in fury, showed no signs of remorse for her outburst. It was as if a dam had burst, and her pent-up frustrations had been unleashed upon me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I knew that allowing this confrontation to escalate further wouldn't help anyone, least of all me. With a shaky voice, I tried to address the accusations she had hurled at me. "Martha, I understand you're upset, but I don't deserve this," I began, my voice quivering with a mix of fear and anger. "I've always tried my best to be a good wife and to make you feel welcome in our home. I'm not sure what's brought this on, but we can talk about it calmly." Martha's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it seemed like she might launch into another tirade, but then something shifted in her expression. It was as if a flicker of doubt crossed her face, and a brief moment of introspection overtook her anger. She hesitated, and in that moment of silence, I seized the opportunity to continue speaking, trying to reach out to her in a calm and empathetic manner. "I know we've had our differences, but I truly care about your son, and I want what's best for both of us. If there's something specific bothering you, let's talk it out." Martha's anger seemed to ebb slightly, and she sank into a chair, her posture less rigid. I cautiously approached her, sitting across from her, still nursing the pain in my cheek. For the first time in a while, we were having a civil conversation. She began to open up about her feelings of being sidelined in her son's life since our marriage. She talked about her fear of losing him and how she struggled to accept our relationship. As she spoke, her anger gave way to vulnerability, and I realized that beneath her harsh exterior was a mother who was afraid of losing her child. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this confrontation could lead to understanding and healing, but little did I know that it was just the beginning of a tumultuous series of events that would forever alter the course of our lives. As Martha began to open up about her feelings, her anger seemed to wane, and a sense of vulnerability took over. I could see tears welling up in her eyes as she spoke about her fears and insecurities regarding her relationship with her son, Mark. It was a side of Martha I had rarely witnessed, and in that moment, I began to understand the depth of her pain. Still nursing the pain from the slap she'd delivered moments earlier, I decided to seize the opportunity for reconciliation. I reached out to Martha, placing a hand gently on her arm, hoping to provide some comfort. "Martha, I understand that you're worried about losing your son, but we can find a way to make this work. We don't have to be at odds with each other. For a moment, it seemed like a breakthrough was possible. Her tears flowed freely now, and she nodded in agreement, as if finally realizing that there could be a path to understanding and compromise. But just as I dared to hope that this confrontation might lead to a resolution, the atmosphere in the room took a sudden chilling turn. Martha's face, still wet with tears, twisted once again into an expression of anger and resentment. With a sudden, shocking motion, she withdrew her arm from my touch and drew her hand back, palm open, ready to strike once more. This time, her slap was even more forceful, landing squarely on my other cheek. The pain was excruciating, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I stumbled backward, this time crashing into a nearby table, which sent a vase of flowers toppling to the ground, shattering into pieces. The room seemed to spin as I held my aching face, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Martha's outburst had taken a dark turn. Her initial vulnerability had given way to a renewed anger, and it was clear that this confrontation was far from over. The sting of her slap was not only physical, but also a sharp reminder that I was trapped in a situation I had never expected to find myself in. As I struggled to regain my composure, I couldn't help but wonder how much further this confrontation would escalate and what it would mean for my marriage, my relationship with Martha, and my own sense of self-worth. As I stood there, dazed and in pain, after Martha's second slap, I realized that I couldn't remain in that toxic environment any longer. The situation had spiraled far beyond what I had ever anticipated, and I needed to protect myself both physically and emotionally. Ignoring the searing pain in my cheeks, I quickly made a decision. I needed to leave, if only temporarily, to gain some distance from the chaos that had unfolded in our home. My primary concern was my safety and well-being. With trembling hands, I turned to face Martha, who seemed momentarily taken aback by her own actions. She hadn't expected her anger to escalate to this level, and perhaps my resolve to leave shocked her into silence. "I can't stay here right now," I managed to say, my voice trembling with a mix of pain and determination. "I need some time to think, to clear my head. This isn't healthy for any of us." Martha's initial anger seemed to morph into something resembling guilt, and she nodded silently, her eyes still filled with tears. But there was no apology, no attempt to make amends. It was as if she had unleashed her fury and now wanted me gone. Ignoring her, I rushed upstairs to our bedroom, hastily packing a small bag with enough essentials to get me through a few days. I knew I couldn't stay with friends or family, as I didn't want to involve them in the turmoil of my marriage just yet. As I left our home, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. I felt betrayed not only by Martha, but also by my husband, Mark, who had remained silent during the entire ordeal. He hadn't intervened or stood up for me when his mother lashed out, and that hurt as much as Martha's slaps. Leaving my home felt like abandoning my marriage, a prospect that filled me with sadness and uncertainty. But at that moment, my primary focus was on my own safety and well-being. I needed space to process what had happened and to decide how to move forward. With a heavy heart, I closed the front door behind me, not knowing that this departure was just the beginning of a harrowing journey filled with unexpected twists and turns. Leaving our home had been a painful but necessary decision. I found temporary refuge at a friend's house, feeling emotionally shattered and physically drained. My cheeks still throbbed from the 2 powerful slaps Martha had delivered, and the emotional wounds ran even deeper. In the midst of the turmoil and uncertainty, I remembered something crucial. Our hidden safe. Inside it was a substantial sum of money, the $150,000 I had diligently saved over the years for our future together. It was meant to be our nest egg, a symbol of our shared dreams and aspirations. But now, as I contemplated the state of my marriage and the betrayal I had experienced, that money took on a new significance. It was a lifeline, a means to secure my independence if things didn't improve between Martha, Mark, and me. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. With a sense of urgency, I decided to return to our house, even though the thought of going back there filled me with dread. I knew that retrieving the money from the safe was essential. I couldn't allow Martha or anyone else to take it away from me. Upon my return, I ascended the staircase to our bedroom, my heart pounding with each step. The once familiar surroundings now felt foreign and hostile, My hands trembled as I reached for the hidden compartment where the safe was concealed. Opening the safe was a nerve-wracking experience, and as I swung the door open, a mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. Thankfully, the money was still there, neatly stacked in envelopes and secured with rubber bands. It was a small victory, but it felt like the first step toward regaining control over my life. However, as I counted the money and double-checked its contents, I noticed something odd. The envelopes had been replaced with a few crumpled pieces of paper. Panic surged through me as I realized that my savings, my $150,000, had vanished. A sense of betrayal and rage welled up inside me. I knew exactly who had taken the money. Martha. The note she had left in the safe said it all. "You're too dumb for that money." It was as if my worst fears had been confirmed. Not only had I been slapped and kicked out of my own home, but my hard-earned savings had been stolen by my own mother-in-law. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and I was left grappling with the profound betrayal of someone I'd once considered family. The theft of my savings marked a devastating turn of events, leaving me with a sinking feeling that my life was spiraling out of control. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a series of shocking revelations and unexpected twists in the tumultuous saga that had become my life. The discovery of my stolen savings sent shockwaves through me. It was a gut-wrenching realization that the one place I'd considered a safe haven had been breached, and my trust had been shattered. The contents of the safe represented years of hard work and sacrifice, and now it was all gone. With trembling hands, I took out the crumpled pieces of paper that had replaced the envelopes of money. It was clear that Martha had taken great care to ensure that I found nothing of value inside the safe. Her actions were deliberate, a cruel twist of the knife in an already agonizing situation. The note she left with its condescending message stung like salt in an open wound. "You're too dumb for that money," the words echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of her disdain for me. It was a declaration of her belief that I was unworthy of financial security, a sentiment that cut deeper than any physical injury. As anger and despair surged within me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. How had things deteriorated to this point? The woman I had once tried to build a relationship with had not only physically assaulted me, but had also stolen a substantial sum of money from me. I considered calling the police, reporting the theft, and pressing charges against Martha, but a nagging thought held me back. Martha was my husband's mother, and involving the authorities would undoubtedly escalate the situation further. It was a dilemma that left me feeling trapped and vulnerable. Instead, I chose to document the theft meticulously, taking photographs of the empty safe and preserving the crumpled note as evidence. I believed that, at the very least, having proof of Martha's actions might provide some leverage if and when I decided to confront her about the theft. In the days that followed, I grappled with a torrent of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. I felt like a stranger in my own life, living a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The support I had hoped for from my husband Mark never materialized. He remained distant and conflicted, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his duty as a husband. The theft of my savings was the ultimate betrayal, and it left me with a profound sense of injustice. I realized that I needed to take control of my own destiny, but I had no idea how to navigate the treacherous path that lay ahead. As I contemplated my next steps, I knew that confronting Martha was inevitable, and it was a confrontation that would redefine the course of our strained relationship. In the days that followed the theft of my savings, my life became a whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty. I couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of betrayal and injustice that had become the new norm. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope that began to emerge. Mark, my husband, had remained disturbingly silent during the confrontations and the subsequent turmoil. But as the gravity of the situation sunk in, he finally started to come to terms with the reality of what had transpired. One evening, after a long day of work, Mark approached me with a somber expression. It was clear that he had something he needed to say. We sat down in the living room, a space that had once been the epicenter of our marital strife, and he began to speak. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with regret, "I want you to know that I've been doing some serious soul-searching in the past few days. I should have intervened when things got out of hand with my mom, and I should have protected you." His words were like a balm to my wounded soul, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. It was the acknowledgement I'd been desperately waiting for. The recognition that I wasn't alone in this ordeal, that my husband was willing to stand by my side. Mark continued, his voice quivering with sincerity. "I can't believe what my mother did, taking your savings like that. It's unforgivable. I'm so sorry for not stopping her." I could see the anguish in his eyes, the realization that he had allowed the situation to escalate to this point. But in that moment, I chose to focus on the fact that he was finally taking responsibility and showing remorse. As the days passed, Mark began to actively support me in confronting his mother about her actions. We decided to seek legal advice to explore our options regarding the stolen money. It was a difficult process, fraught with emotional turmoil, but Mark's newfound determination gave me strength. We also began to address the deeper issues that had plagued our marriage. The rift between us had grown, largely due to Martha's interference, but we were committed to working through our problems. Therapy became an integral part of our journey, helping us to communicate more effectively and rebuild the trust that had been eroded. Despite the progress we were making in our marriage, Martha remained a looming presence in our lives. Her actions had caused irreparable damage to our relationship, and the path to reconciliation with her was unclear. Little did we know that a significant turning point was on the horizon, one that would shake the foundation of our family dynamics once more. As Mark and I continued to work on our marriage and sought legal advice about the stolen savings, a sudden change in our family dynamics took us by surprise. The tensions that had torn us apart seemed to intensify, but this time, it was Martha who reached a breaking point. Weeks had passed since the theft, and despite my initial reluctance, I knew that confronting Martha was inevitable. Mark and I had arranged a meeting with her, hoping to address the theft and the impact it had on our lives. When we arrived at Martha's house for the confrontation, the atmosphere was tense. She greeted us with a mixture of reluctance and guilt, her eyes avoiding mine as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. We sat down in her living room, a room that had seen so many arguments and tears. Martha's voice quivered as she began to speak. "I can't take it anymore. What I've done to both of you." Her admission was unexpected, and it caught us off guard. She confessed to the theft of my savings and the physical assaults, her remorse evident in her voice and demeanor. She explained that her husband, Robert, had fallen seriously ill shortly after the confrontation that had led to my leaving our home. He had been in and out of hospitals, facing a life-threatening condition. It was during this time that he confronted Martha about her actions, pushing her to come clean and make amends. Martha had been grappling with guilt and shame over her behavior, and her husband's deteriorating health had pushed her to a breaking point. She had reached out to a therapist to help her address her anger and insecurity issues. This unexpected turn of events had led to a moment of self-reflection for Martha, and she realized the gravity of her actions. She handed me an envelope containing my $150,000 in cash, tearfully apologizing for the pain she'd caused. Her words were sincere, and I could see the regret etched on her face. It was a far cry from the woman who'd slept me and stolen from me just weeks before. Mark and I were taken aback by the sudden change in Martha's demeanor. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a woman who'd been consumed by anger and jealousy, but was now seeking redemption. We were left with mixed emotions, unsure of how to process this unexpected twist. Martha's transformation was a pivotal moment in our tumultuous journey, and it raised complex questions about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the possibility of healing our fractured relationship. Little did we know that our path forward would be filled with challenges as we navigated the difficult road of mending what had been broken. Martha's sudden confession and change of heart left my husband, Mark, and me grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. It was a turning point in our tumultuous journey, and it presented us with a profound dilemma: how to respond to her newfound remorse and willingness to make amends. After Martha's tearful apology and the return of my stolen savings, we sat in her living room, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The room, once a battleground of arguments and confrontations, now felt like a place of reckoning and potential reconciliation. Martha's husband, Robert, who had been bedridden and gravely ill, lay in a nearby room, his condition a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the urgency of addressing the wounds within our family. Martha had explained that his health had deteriorated rapidly since the events that had transpired. In her moment of vulnerability, Martha recounted her sessions with a therapist, the painful self-reflection she'd undertaken, and the realization of the damage she had inflicted on her son's marriage. She expressed deep remorse for her actions, particularly the theft of my savings, and she admitted that her anger and jealousy had driven her to hurt the people she loved. As I listened to Martha's heartfelt words, it became apparent that her transformation was genuine. She was no longer the formidable, domineering figure I had known. Instead, she appeared fragile and remorseful, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders by admitting her wrongdoing. Mark, too, was profoundly affected by his mother's confession. He had grappled with the turmoil of choosing between his wife and his mother, and now, faced with Martha's remorse, he found himself torn between forgiveness and skepticism. It was clear that mending our fractured relationship would be a complex and challenging process. In the days that followed, Martha continued to seek therapy and worked diligently to make amends. She reached out to me with gestures of goodwill, from heartfelt apologies to small acts of kindness. I could sense her genuine desire to rebuild our relationship, and I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Mark and I decided to attend family therapy sessions with Martha, hoping that professional guidance would help us navigate the difficult path to healing. It was a rocky road filled with moments of tension and uncertainty, but it also offered opportunities for open dialogue and understanding. Robert's health remained a constant reminder of the importance of reconciliation within our family. Although he was unable to participate in our therapy sessions, his presence loomed large, serving as a silent catalyst for change. As weeks turned into months, the scars of the past began to heal, albeit slowly. Forgiveness was a challenging journey, but the newfound empathy and effort from all parties involved allowed us to make progress. Martha's transformation from an adversary to a remorseful mother was a testament to the power of self-reflection and the potential for redemption. While the wounds of the past would never fully disappear, they served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for healing within the bonds of family. Our story was far from over, and the road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope that our family could rebuild and find a way to move forward together.